in 1994, that run with Owen, Rumble, turn, WrestleMania match, SummerSlam cage match, the whole year, the chemistry was just unreal with you guys. It just was, it felt like it was there from the minute it started. Is that something that came easily to you guys of sort of portraying that chemistry?
I want to say it was, but it took a little time to figure it out. Owen, he had never worked heel much, I don't think. So that was new. Like the fact that Owen was going to be a villain, that was a whole challenge in itself. But that was new ground for Owen. So there's things that were not really known yet about Owen being how good he could be as a getting heat in the ring and even buying Owen as a villain because he was such a likable guy. I remember Owen and I actually worked out a whole match, and it's actually I think I've gotten a outline of the match up somewhere. But we had this match put together for the WrestleMania 10, and I always say I think it was a better match than the one we did.
Wow.
But but the problem was, and actually, I called Owen I think 2 days before WrestleMania, like before we left, like on the it might have been the Thursday night or the Friday before we left for the weekend. And I called Owen, I think it was on a Thursday night, and I said, "You need to come up to Dad's house, my dad's house, and right now, and we need to go over this match a little bit because I've realized as we've worked this match out that this is the wrong match. This match is gonna maybe set us up for disaster. Like it's the wrong story. What it was Owen was doing a lot of high flying and a lot of his really good moves. So I was trying to get in. I was trying to part of me was trying to sell Owen, get Owen hired, like even though he's hired, but I wanted to get it like I wanted to show them how good Owen could be. And we worked out a match with a lot of Owen's best high flying moves in it. And they would have been really it would have been a great match to watch today. Like if you and me could sit down and watch that match the way we would have way it would have happened.
Hmm.
But at the time, I remember thinking about it the night after I think we had a rehearsal, maybe even on the Wednesday night, like where we kind of talked everything through, and I could just tell something wasn't right. And I thought about it all day, and then I called Owen. I said, "You better meet me at my dad's house, and we better talk through this match again because you're doing too much good guy stuff. There's no reason why the crowd isn't going to get behind you and start cheering you. And that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for the fans to like you. We're looking for the fans to hate your guts. And there's not enough of that in this match anymore. And we need to revise it. And so if you ever watch the WrestleMania 10 match, you can see Owen do a lot of things where he's biting my fingers and trying to break my fingers and breaking my eyes and, taking his boot and racing, racking my eyes with that. And like he was doing a lot of cheap, what some people would call cheap heat in wrestling, where you just do all the nastiest things you can to get to rile up the fans. And that's what we needed. That's what had to be done. Owen had to be a villain. And I always loved the match. I thought it was a great match considering we never worked before, you know, being two brothers we weren't even really that familiar with each other's styles, other than Owen had watched me for years. But I had never watched Owen that much. I had, when he was broke into wrestling, I was working in WWF and on the road every day. So I never really, I knew Owen was good, and I wanted to give him his best matches, but I also knew that it was a big mistake for him not to not if we didn't do it right from the start, where he was a bad guy,
Yeah.
it would die a really lousy death, and like Owen wouldn't have got over as a bad guy, and the whole thing would have kind of been a failed experience, but a failed experiment. But we did. I like I said after that match at WrestleMania 10, and then the next day we went to England, probably London, probably at the Wembley Arena. probably wrestled alone. I think the next day after, like 2 days after WrestleMania 10. But and I think we did good. Like those were the best matches that I think we ever had in those weeks following. And then really once we came back from that heart attack tour in Europe, all the matches that we ever had for the rest of our careers were great matches because we found the right formula in those weeks after WrestleMania 10, and we found those in England.
I do, when you re-signed in 1996 with WWF, you worked with Steve Austin, obviously famously at Survivor Series and WrestleMania. What was it about Steve Austin that stood out to you that you wanted to work with him?
Um, I was. There's a good story in that. I went into Vince's office one day in probably 1996 and said, like, why don't we get better guys in here? Like, how come there's no fresh guys, like no new guys? And Vince was like, said something like they were trying to, and he named a couple of guys that they were working on trying to get hired. And I said to him, I said, Steve Austin just signed with what was that?
ECW?
ECW. Yeah, he just signed with ECW. He got fired by WCW, and Bischoff let him go, which is why there was always some problems with Steve and Eric. Was from that, like how Eric Bischoff could fire Steve Austin and think that he wasn't very good tells you how much Eric Bischoff knew about the business. But so Steve and I, yeah. So I told Vince, I actually kind of complained and kind of ragged that whoever he had hiring guys wasn't doing a very good job because Steve Austin just got signed by ECW, and when you should have picked him up in a heartbeat, he would have been perfect. Like those are the kind of guys we need. And he wasn't even sure who Steve Austin was. But literally, like 3 days, 4 days later, maybe even 2 days later, like Steve Austin was sitting in the dresser, and I walked in. It's like, what are you doing here? And because we didn't know each other. That's when I first met him. But I knew, and I'm pretty sure that my little conversation with Vince is what got Steve hired. They immediately went out and found him and hired him. And ECW let him out of his contract, and he went and worked for Vince. And so I was always pushing for Steve. So Steve and me, we worked together. We had a really good history, like chemistry together. And I knew right away that we would do well together and work with each other. And so when Steve first came in, he worked with his son and he worked with me. And that was really good for both of us if we kind of got to know each other. And I had really good matches with Steve back in when he first came in '96 before the Survivor Series match. But we had worked house shows and a lot of time with no angles or no just Bret Hart for Steve Austin, and he was trying to find his gimmick. I remember that they had some, then they called him the Ringmaster or some stupid name, and I remember he was like, he didn't think it was a good name. He wasn't happy with that, and I didn't blame him. I was like, Ringmaster seems like a pretty lame name for a guy that could be a great villain. I was one of those kind of guys that was always pushing for Steve and helping Steve a lot. Steve, and I don't mean this as any kind of put down or anything, but when Steve got to WWF in 1996, he was still pretty like kind of green still. He never really he had so much potential, but he never really worked with great guys. He'd always just been thrown in matches and kind of put in situations, but he never worked with a Bret Hart or the top guys very much. And I think I when I wrestled Steve in those days, he was very erratic. Um, he'd do stuff right out of nowhere, like on the fly. He suddenly just decide to do a bunch of moves where you go, "What are you doing?" why are you suddenly working my arm? I was getting my heat up on you, and now you're working my arm. Like, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I had to always, not always, but a lot of the time, I had to kind of redirect Steve in the matches and calm him down a little bit. And I think I helped Steve a lot by teaching him to not that he kind of panicked sometimes in the ring. Like he suddenly, like for example, if he screwed up a move or something happened that didn't go right, he would get so frustrated at himself that he would forget everything else that he had to do for the rest of the match. He'd draw blank and kind of go blank out there. And it was like, I was more like, Steve, that was such a little tiny mistake. Nobody even knows that we screwed up there, or that you screwed up, or I screwed up, or no one even knows that there was a mistake made,
Mhm.
except for you, and you're letting it ruin the match. And you need to get back on track. There's always going to be mishaps in a wrestling match and things that don't go right. But you can't draw a blank after that. Like you have to remember the rest of the match. And he sometimes he would panic and kind of get going so fast that he didn't know where he was anymore. Like, where are we? And it was always, I think I was the guy that taught him to calm down, stop, freeze the moment, just don't panic, and just get back on track. And I think I really did teach him a lot of that.